Welcome to another beautiful day in the land of music. Today, we're going to be talking all about the sample synth section here on the Nord Piano 6. So here on the panel, we have this section right here that's labeled sample synth across the top. I have this program C26 called up. Nice little soft choir layer. And you'll see here that we have two layers in our sample synth section. Each of these layers has its own volume control fader and an on-off button right below that layer. Now, these buttons serve a couple of different purposes. One, that allows us to select the active layer. And the active layer is the layer that any change we make to a parameter, it's going to be affecting that active layer. This also works with our effects. So the effects are going to follow whichever layer is active. So for example, if I want to put a little bit of delay on this layer B, and I take the reverb or the delay and I turn that on. Now that's only applying to my layer B, which is the active layer, blinking in red. So if I change to layer A, you'll notice layer A is now blinking red. That one is the active layer. Maybe I increase. The reverb on that, and I'm able to do that right from there. Let's recall this program back to the original. Nice, really cool little choir sound. So coming back to here, these layers are the active layer, but we can also turn the layers on and off by pressing or holding these on-off buttons. So right now they're both on, so tapping on them just changes the active layer. If we wanted to turn them off, we could hold down on the button, and that turns that layer off. Again, I could do that on layer A, and now I have no sound because all of my layers are off. If I want to turn one on, I can tap on it. And if I want to turn more than one layer on at a time, I just tap the buttons together at the same time. So really easy. Again, we can hold both, turn both off at the same time, tap both, turn them on. So that's how you use the layer buttons underneath those two layer faders. The LED, of course, is going to show us where our volume is currently at. And as I scroll through these, notice how that is changing. While my fader doesn't change, I still have a representation with the LEDs of the volume that layer is. Again, this is just a sampling of some of the programs that come included with the Nord Piano 6 that have a couple of different layers turned on in the sample synth. sampling of programs. These all come with the Nord Piano 6 from the factory. Just scrolling through a few, just so you can kind of see a taste of what these samples sound like in the sample synth section. So all of the ones I just played are all sounds out of that sample synth selection. So that brings me to my second point is, how do we choose sounds here in the sample synth sound section? So what I'm gonna do is, I'm just gonna go back to the very beginning, which is a white grand. We're gonna turn the piano layer off, and we're gonna turn sample synth layer on, which is this string ensemble. Cool. So how do we choose a different sample for layer A? Because right now, we don't want strings. Maybe we want something random like a guitar. So we have these two encoders right here in the sample select, one for category, one for sample. So as we turn the category, we see the categories change here, and then below that we see the first sample within that category. If we hold shift, we see a larger list view, and then we can let go of shift. So basically you hold shift and scroll just a little bit, and then once you've started scrolling, that list view is gonna stay up until you tap on shift exit. So again, scroll a little bit. Let's come over to our guitars. Let's see what we have here in guitar plucked. So now I can exit out of that. Now when we come to the sample, let's just scroll that encoder, and we can scroll through the 18 samples within this guitar plucked category. We can hold shift and we can see a full list, same exact functionality. Anytime you see this little list icon, you can get a list by holding shift while you turn that encoder. Now as we scroll through here, we can sample these. So they load up instantly as we scroll to them. Let's go to this acoustic guitar picked. We can tap on shift exit, and we're not seeing it here, but we could tap on our program view, change that view so we do see the sample that is on our layer A. Now that we've selected this acoustic guitar pick on our layer A, let's select a flute on layer B. So I'm gonna switch over to layer B. And now notice, when I don't have both layers on, I can just switch between those layers by tapping on these layer on-off buttons. So if we wanted two different sounds that maybe we can use throughout our program at different times, then we don't press them together. We don't layer those two together, but rather we leave them separate, and we can just tap between them. So let's go to layer B, and let's scroll the category till we get to the wind solo, and we'll use this flute multi. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna use some of the functionality here within the sample synth section to turn this flute into some sort of synth pad sound. So we have this section here called envelope, and the attack, decay, and release allow us to shape this sound. So attack is going to be how quickly that sound comes in when we press on the key. It's pretty quick right now, but as we bring that up, we start to slow down the entry of that sound. Now decay is how long that sound sustains before it drops off, even if we're holding the note. So if we do something really short, that was about 3 seconds, I believe, and that drops off pretty quickly. Now, as we bring that up, we get all the way to the top and it's set to sustain, which means as long as we hold that key, it's going to play the sound. Now, release is how quickly the sound goes away when we let go of the key. So as we bring that up, So now we've taken this flute, which normally has a pretty quick attack and a pretty quick release, and we've slowed that down. And then we could layer that with our guitar by pressing both our layer buttons together. Then we could change the volume of that really quickly. Let's bring the flute volume down. So really quickly, we've started to design our own little program here with that acoustic guitar and the flute. Now you could add an equalizer to that flute and really take some of those harsher tones out to really warm out that and make it into a sort of synth pad. But that's just a quick little example of how we can use the envelope section here in the sample synth. Now let's turn our B layer off by holding down on that. So we just have our acoustic. If we want to change the octave of our sound, we have these octave up and down buttons. That's going to come in really handy when you're splitting the keyboard into two zones. You want to control the octaves for the sound that's in each zone. You'll use those more than you will on an 88 key where you can just play whatever you want. We also have sustain pedal and volume pedal enable disable by holding shift and tapping on the octave up or octave down buttons. Sustain pedal is just turning the sustain pedal on or off for that layer we have active. Volume pedal, if we turn that on, I have a Yamaha FC7 plugged in. Now you'll notice that as I move the pedal up and down, it's changing the volume of my layer. So basically turning the pedal on for our volume of the layer. This setting is going to apply to each layer independently. So if I turn that on for layer A, come over to layer B, it's off for layer B. So we can set the sustain and the volume pedal independently by layer, which is really cool. Now here in the right-hand side of the sample synth, let's just talk about some of the features we have here. So the voice mode is going to be how many notes the voicing allows as you're playing it. So right now with no LEDs lit, we're in poly, which means we can play more than one note at a time. If we change this to legato or mono, it only allows one note to be played at a time. So even if I play a chord, it's only going to take one note of that chord, basically the last note that I trigger. Even if I'm playing a chord, one of those is just a fraction of a second later than the rest. That is the note that gets taken over. Now the difference is legato and mono, you'll notice a little difference as I'm playing it. With the legato, it's the first note that gets the attack, and then any subsequent notes have a reduced attack, whereas mono, every single note gets the same level of attack. Now for a guitar, I'm going to leave it on poly, whereas maybe a synth lead sound, let's just find a lead sound in our category. So we'll go to the synth lead category. Let's just go to like the pulse lead. Now if we turn legato on, or mono, as we're playing faster notes, it gives a bit of this analog synth feel to it, which is kind of cool. Now, when we're in mono or legato mode, we can turn glide on, and we have two different glide settings. This allows us, it's basically portamento, which is the sliding of one note to the next. So I'm going to leave it in mono. I'm going to grab a different sample. Now we can turn glide on by holding shift and tapping on the button that says glide underneath it. So in the number one setting, Notice I'm getting this glide between notes. I'm actually going to switch to legato. I think legato gives just a little bit better of an effect when we're gliding. So what it's going to do, it's not going to glide unless we maintain the hold on the previous note. See the difference there? So only when I'm holding and then play a second note, it glides between those two notes. Glide number 2 is a slower glide between those notes. Again, same functionality. When I'm holding one and then play the next one while the previous is held, it glides between those notes. So that gives us a way to enable a little bit of portamento, even though it's not full control over that, still can get that there. And then let's go ahead and turn glide off so you can cycle between 1, 2, and off by holding shift and tapping on that button. We're also going to go into poly mode. Again, you can cycle between the 3 modes by tapping on that button without holding shift. So let's move to vibrato. So vibrato is going to give us, let's go to a bit of a better sound here. So we have this string sound. Now with vibrato, right now, it's set so if I hold down on this vibrato button, listen to the sound. Similar to a traditional modulation wheel that you're bringing up to add some vibrato to that sound. With the vibrato setting here, we can set it to always be on, regardless of whether this button is held. Delay is going to delay the onset. So when we hold notes a little bit longer, that vibrato fades in after a little bit of time. We can hold shift and tap down on this button to set the rate, the amount, and the time of delay before that comes in. And then pedal is vibrato that would be enabled by a control pedal rather than the button here. So we have different ways we can use that vibrato. Let me go ahead and turn vibrato off and exit out of the menu by tapping on Shift Exit. Let's talk about Unison and dynamics to wrap up the sample synth section here. So Unison is going to work in a couple of different ways. So on acoustic type sounds, so let me just come in here and grab that acoustic guitar again. If we tap on Unison, notice how it changes the characteristic of that sound. Almost like the mic position on a guitar. We can cycle between 1, 2, and 3 and off with this button here. Now on a synth sound, again, I kind of screwed up by scrolling the wrong wheel, but let's come back into here and let's choose a classic. This is going to add oscillators almost, or the simulation of adding oscillators to your synth type sounds. So again, Unison can kind of add a little bit of chorus or beefiness to those sounds, and on the acoustic ones, gives it almost like different mic positions or even a little bit of chorus depending on the sound that you have picked. Now with dynamics, dynamics are going to allow us to change the dynamics of that sample. So let me go back to the guitar sample here. So notice how that characteristic or the dynamic of that sound is changing. So as you cycle through those, it's changing, again, the dynamics. So you can use that with Unison to get just a little bit of different tonal qualities to your samples. And then we can hold down on Shift and hold down on this button to get to the sample information, which is going to give us the version as well as the size for the sample we have called up. That's going to be based on whichever layer is active, the sample that's tied to that layer. So hopefully that was helpful, giving you a little bit of context into the sample synth section here on the Nord Piano 6. Again, a really powerful way to build some sounds, really customize and tailor them to your liking, and then you can store those to programs in the program memory by tapping on Store, naming that, and then storing that to the keyboard. If you have any questions with what I went over in this video, feel free to throw those down in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks for watching. Stay inspired and keep making that music.